Welcome everyone to the Iowa City Public Library. My name is Maeve Clark. I'm the Adult Services Coordinator here at the library. This is our second in a series of Weber on Wednesday events. During the month of May, the library celebrates not only National Preservation Month and local history, but also our local historian, Irving Weber. Irving Weber, who of you out here knows who Irving Weber is? Oh, good for you. You must know who Irving Weber is. You now will know who Irving Weber is. Irving Weber lived his entire life and almost the entire 20th century in his beloved Iowa City. His family roots were deep in the beginnings of Iowa City, as his maternal grandparents settled in Iowa City in 1839. His paternal grandparents came to town in 1857. He was born in 1900, a momentous beginning of a new century. He was educated at the Iowa City Public Schools and graduated from the University of Iowa in 1922. He is remembered for many things. He was the University of Iowa's first All-American swimmer. He was founder of Quality Check Dairies and served as its president until his retirement in 1966. He was an active member of the Iowa City Host Noon Lions Club and was the local school board president in 1952 to 1953. In 1994, Irving B. Weber Elementary School was named in his honor. Weber may be most remembered for the over 800 articles he wrote for the Iowa City Press Citizen beginning in 1973. Obviously, retirement did not suit him terribly, and so he had another endeavor. Irving's view of history was not one of a dull retelling of facts and names. He told what it was like to grow up in Iowa City. The best places to buy penny candy, the joys of cooling off in Melrose Lake in the summer, and sledding parties on closed-off streets. He recorded for future generations the story of Iowa City as no one else could. In 1989, in gratitude for his work in recording local history, Irving B. Weber was named as Iowa City's official historian. And some of you may know that there's a statue on the where Seashore Hall is, but it's Iowa Avenue and Lynn Street, right? Where Lynn Street runs into Iowa Avenue, and there's a statue there with a man with a hat, doffing his hat to you. That is Irving B. Weber. All of the articles Irving Weber wrote for the Iowa City Press Citizen are available online at the University of Iowa Digital Library through the cooperation of the Iowa City Host Lions Club. They published 8 volumes of his writings, the Iowa City Public Library, and Lolly Eggers, the former library director. In 2006, Lolly Eggers published Iowa City's Irving Weber, a biography, and her book chronicles Weber's life and provides information about the 20th century Iowa City. He died in 1997, 3 years short of a century of life. True to his character, his last days were spent writing history and listening to the Iowa basketball games on the radio. So tonight, we have a program that is not only Weber on Wednesdays, but it's also Music is the Word. So for the last 9 months, we started in September, we have been welcoming the School of Music to downtown Iowa City. As you are all aware, the School of Music will have a brand new building, has a brand new building, will open a brand new building in the fall, right?
Yes.
Right? And we thought, well, what better way to welcome than to do music programming? So we've done lots and lots of music programming, and tonight is one of our programs. But before I turn the program over to our speaker, I wanted to tell you about another program that you might be interested in the series. So next Wednesday night, we have a program not here at the Iowa City Public Library, still Weber on Wednesday, but at the First United Methodist Church, and it's an organ concert. And that will be Dr. Melanie Sigafus will be playing the organ, and we will have some material that we have taken from their archives at the church library and digitized and then printed. So we've got a display upstairs on the second floor, and we'll also have that material with us at First Methodist. But now, for tonight's program, I'll turn the evening over to Katie Buehner, who is the librarian at the Rita Benton
Music Library.
Music Library at the School of Music. Katie.
Good evening. There are really 2 ways to tell the story of the history of the School of Music. One would be for a first-hand observer to tell an oral history of their experiences. And the other would be to take primary and secondary sources and construct a narrative through research. And tonight's presentation adopts the latter approach for two reasons. First, I moved to Iowa City just about 2 years ago, so my firsthand experience of this history only equals 1.8% of the time period under discussion. Second, as a librarian, I wanted to delve into the archives and collections the school has produced in the last century in order to see what history those documents would tell. To that end, I've consulted the following collections: the Philip Greeley Clapp papers and the School of Music papers, which are both available in university archives; the Jaime Voxman papers, which some are in university archives and some are still in the music library; the Frederick Crane papers, which we're currently processing in the music library, and especially Dr. Crane's book that he wrote in 2006 in honor of the school music centennial. And if you'd like an excellent mix of oral and research history, read this book. For every once in a while, you get a nice little personal note from Dr. Frederick Crane. I've also looked at various circulating and rare collections in the Rita Benton Music Library, especially the many dissertations and theses that have been written about the people and ensembles associated with the School of Music, including Philip Greeley Clapp, Jaime Voxman, and ensembles including orchestra, band, opera, the Center for New Music, and the Stradivari String Quartet. So now that we know what we are doing and how we are doing it, let us turn to the task at hand. There are documented musical activities at the University of Iowa that started just 5 years after its founding, but music kind of floated on the periphery of the curriculum for the next 50 years. So in the year our story begins, there were a few established music groups on campus. There was the band, which was housed in the military department and remained there until 1936. And you can see there are about 15, 20 members of that ensemble. There were glee clubs for both men and women. But in 1906, the university established the School of Music Affiliated. While still not wholly integrated into the university, this foothold proved crucial to the establishment of lasting programs in music and was the inception of the entity we know today as the School of Music. Between 1906 and 1921, the following ensembles, lesson instruction, and other subjects could be studied at Iowa. In 1911, the School of Music was added to the newly established College of Fine Arts, along with architecture, design, and, Dr. Wilson-Kimber, expression. Finally, a Bachelor of Music degree was made available in piano, violin, voice, or organ, so you could get a performance degree, and that was all. The school also offered some curriculum for public school teachers, but it was more, so you're going to be an elementary school teacher, here's how to add music into your classroom, and less, go be a music teacher. The College of Fine Arts lasted only 4 years, but the School of Music continued on and was integrated into the campus proper as a department in 1915. There were 4 administrators during this 15-year span, starting with Effie Mae Proffitt, then Charles Fisher, Gustav Schuttle, and William Hayes. However, each studio teacher set their own schedule, including their course load and fees. Could you imagine such a thing? The studio was where most instruction occurred, and I love this photo. It reminds me when I was a kid visiting the George Eastman House in Rochester, where there's this gorgeous music salon with a lovely piano and a harp in the corner. And I see this and I think every faculty member would kill to have that studio today. You could also add a few extras to your degree, you know, a little bit of history and theory along the way if you liked. However, this model was not to last, and it would be in 1921 that the school would begin to establish itself as a fully fledged degree-granting program on campus. That began with this man, Dr. Philip Greeley Clapp. He actually first came to Iowa in 1919, but he flirted with going to Juilliard for a couple of years and didn't really settle in Iowa until 1921. He would remain there for the rest of his career. Boston-born, Harvard-educated, he had degrees in composition and theory and had studied composing and conducting in Germany. At Iowa, he taught music appreciation, composition, and conducting. He took the podiums of the orchestra and the chorus at various points throughout his tenure. One of Clapp's first major decisions as director was to abolish the practice of faculty-set course offerings and studio fees. He campaigned to have the music faculty paid in the same manner and at a comparable rate to the faculty in other departments, so going from hourly to salaried. And course schedules and offerings would be set at the department level. This was a highly unpopular move with the faculty, who liked the freedom of setting their own schedules and probably even more so, their own salaries. One part of the new schedule involved students receiving 2 lessons a week instead of 1. The faculty tried to outmaneuver Clapp on this, but were unsuccessful. In a letter to his first wife, Gladys, Clapp recounts, "The funniest thing so far has been the Starbucks Swisher attempt to force the 1 lesson a week basis into the session. First, after their fashion, they encouraged a lot of people to think that they could get one lesson a week if I would only consent. Of course I wouldn't, so people decided not to register at all, just as the strikers had hoped. But at about the time when I was supposed to take the bars down in order not to wipe out the department, America's leading piano teachers found they would not be retained on the payroll unless they found some more students. So the cats came back. You'll find that Clapp loves to do this, where he puts a little phrase at the end of what he says, punctuate a paragraph, some phrase in quotes. You'll see it about 3 or 4 more times. There were 41 faculty who served in the School of Music between 1921 and 1954, only 4 continuing from the previous era, including the infamous Starbuck and Swisher. Also, Ori E. Van Doren, who ran the band, and Mildred Paddock, who was a voice faculty member. Chorus offerings expanded in important ways during the Clapp years. Students could train in winds, brass, and strings. The choir, orchestra, and band were all eventually department run and began to build in numbers and ability. The opera workshop was established in the late 50s, and other chamber music groups started to formalize. All 4 string instruments had individual studio teachers, and other instruments started to follow in other areas. Paul Anderson was hired in 1949 to teach horn, Betty Bang Mather in 1952 to teach flute. Organ and piano continued on, and courses in music education, theory, history, and composition all had dedicated instructors and curriculum that was developed to create a sequence of study in those areas. Students could receive either a Bachelor of Music or a Bachelor of Arts, and in 1923, they could start working toward graduate degrees. One of Clapp's greatest allies in establishing academic programs in music was Carl Seashore, head of the psychology department. Seashore specialized in psychology of music, where he developed tests to measure student aptitude and understanding of music. He served on graduate committees in music for many years and actually offered a graduate degree in psychology of music, which was taken by one of Iowa's most well-known alums. We'll mention him later. Here's one of my favorite mentions of Seashore in Clapp's correspondence. This is again to his wife. It also describes end of the semester mayhem in 1925, which will seem eerily similar to today. I admit all accusations from the start, but such a 10 days, major exams, a highly honorary position as member-at-large on Robert Seashore's PhD committee, 2 hours on each oral exam, preparing and correcting the written ones, members of the various committees caving in the heat and having to be replaced, candidates all nervous. A lot of faculty and students coming down with a distemper, Seashore going crazy with the heat and heckling all our minors into conniptions, and then as usual passing them anyway. Getting the corner horns turned off during Eugene's super recital. Heat, rain, it is enough. Iowa was, as is often cited, the first university to creative work in lieu of a traditional dissertation or thesis. And music that meant musical compositions could be submitted. And in 1925, but I can't find the document. I just can't. There were 2, both were tone poems. The first was by Marian Edmond, and it was entitled Pandora, based on the myth of Pandora's box. The second by Anna Margaret Starbuck, titled Smoke and Steel, and that was inspired by a Carl Sandburg poem. If the name Starbuck rings a bell, that is because Margaret was what we might now term a faculty brat. Her father taught in religious studies, her mother in the School of Music. She was one of the faculty members who predated Clapp, and the completion of her daughter's thesis was another point of contention between the 2. This might be because Margaret was a bit behind her classmate Marian in completing the project, Clapp writes. Margaret Starbuck is finding, to her surprise and consternation, that finishing her score is a big job. She's keeping right at it now, and will, I think, finish her work, especially as I have a notion, which I am naturally not publishing, that I can get her a time extension of about 3 days at the end if necessary. But her parents are clearly worried and are starting a prophylactic rumor that I could excuse her from finishing if I were decent and chose. Of course, Seashore vows that neither she nor anybody else can get to a graduate degree without finishing her dissertation. So I expect to be sustained and am not worrying. If you're wondering why Clapp was concerned about Margaret's document, you only need to look at the final product. A little bit big, and you'll see that she's, especially towards the end, she starts to scratch notes out with a knife or something and change harmonies from one voice to another, change her mind about articulations. It's mayhem. You should definitely come up and take a look at this later if you get a chance. I'm hoping a student someday will want to extract parts for this and Pandora so we can hear what they sound like. Clapp continues in a later letter after the project is finished. Mrs. Starbuck is a scream. Having thought that Margaret couldn't finish on time, she made a great touse about the general worthlessness of the whole project, and is now having a hard time to reconcile her contempt for the outfit with her pride in the job. Add the complication that she announced to too large a public that I was trying to prevent Margaret from getting her degree, but that she would get it over my head. Whereas I am telling the world how good the piece is and how tickled I am that it got finished on time, and you can see why the good woman chose a purple complexion. Let's just say Philip Greeley Clapp liked to poke the bear. Of the overall creative thesis endeavor, however, Clapp concludes that, quote, instead of sniffing at the idea of orchestral compositions for dissertations, they, in reference to the committee, very decidedly took the line that these pieces were far superior to the average master's dissertation, as they are, and that their recognition by the university is an honor to the latter, as it is. A good time was had by all. The School of Music was always struggling to find space on campus and was sort of peppered all over the place. Yeah, the students laugh. They understand this problem all too well. They were in the Unitarian Church, North Hall, doing performances in McBride and Schaefer, and they scored some space in the day building on the second floor. In 1932, the old isolation hospital was refit. The School of Music got that space, now known as Seashore Hall. Performances still taking place in McBride, the Union Lounge, and for performances that couldn't fit anywhere else, they did them in the Field House. That includes the 1955 Dimitri Mitropoulos conducted Berlioz Requiem, and I just can't imagine what that must have been like. In terms of ensembles, Ori E. Van Doren did a good job of growing band membership, doubling it before he left Iowa in 1937. And he was the person who saw the transfer of the band from the military department to the music department. And then Charles Reiter became director, and he also oversaw the marching band, which was about 110 strong. Harold Stark moved smoothly from getting his master's degree at Iowa in 1934 to becoming head of voice and director of the chorus by 1935. He won't be the last graduate to make such a transition until 1961, and then he turned his focus to opera. Frank Kendry led the department-run orchestra from 1921 until 1937, and at that time, Clapp took the podium and never gave it up. A chamber orchestra was started in 1936, but it would be of the larger ensemble that New York critic Olin Downs would compliment in 1941 as, quote, the best college orchestra we have heard thus far anywhere in the country. And Downs should have known he was soloist on that concert, and I can't see him complimenting an orchestra that didn't show up and do the job. In 25 years, Clapp took a small band of studio instructors and built a highly regarded program conferring undergraduate and graduate degrees, maintaining top-flight ensembles, and recruiting world-class faculty and student body. Clapp was always in the center of the action, conducting, composing, planning, scheming. He even broadcast his music appreciation lectures over radio, so if you were in Iowa, you could learn music history. He wrote program notes for orchestra concerts. He was involved in everything. Perhaps it is then no surprise that by 1950, his health took a big decline and began to impede his ability to keep up with the frantic pace of managing the school. The university was also changing. New administrators had ideas for the School of Music and its role on campus that were far from aligned with Clapp's vision. Following several years in which a trio of faculty members assisted him with the management of the school, Clapp was forced to step down as director. At this point, letters of recommendation and self-nomination started to pour in. They're actually in Clapp's archive. It's interesting reading, as well as a few internal candidates positioning themselves to take over Clapp's administrative role. From our lofty position in history, we know what happened next. Instead of hiring somebody of international or national renown, Iowa selected internal candidate Jaime Voxman to replace P.G. Clapp. Sort of an odd choice. He had a bachelor's of chemical engineering and a master's in psychology of music that he'd done in the psychology department. But here's how it went down, according to Clapp, as he describes the process to a friend. The headship matter has reached this stage. All the candidates ever nominated, and those which may have been concealed up somebody's sleeve, either got eliminated or eliminated themselves, except Jaime. The picturesque details are too numerous and fascinating to retell today. But things came to a head by some of us insisting that the powers follow their own printed rules and consult the staff as to whom the latter preferred, and whether the new incumbent should be a head or a chairman. So who did they want, and should that person be head of the department or chairman? The staff unanimously preferred Jaime and voted 11-8 that he should be head. Since EEH, that would be Earl Harper, then director of the School of Fine Arts, and DBS, that'd be Dewey B. Stewart, Dean of the College of Liberal Arts, clearly wanted almost anybody else, and a chairman rather than a head, the whole vote has to be sent to the state board through channels. You can well see the right egg is in the basket, but the chicken is still to be hatched. On April 8th, 1954, Clapp left off writing this letter to Wilby and headed to orchestra rehearsal. He was kept on as a faculty member when he stepped down and was still in charge of the orchestra. As you note in the corner states that was added later, the temperature in his office registered 102 degrees. The story goes that he told the orchestra to take a good long time to tune, and then he collapsed and died the following morning of a heart attack. I looked through a lot of papers for this presentation. The Clapp papers just fascinated me. I really enjoyed reading his writing. Clearly, he is an engaging writer. But he could be a complete sob, and then he could turn around and help a student with the most basic problem. He had a clear heart for students. He talked about them constantly and trying to help them through their degrees and pushing them and watching them succeed. It's really something. He would write letters to high school teachers who would ask him, why are you teaching this way at Iowa? I've heard about it, tell me about it. He'd be like, well, we do it this way. You don't have to do it, but if you want to, here's a step-by-step, and here's exactly why we're doing it. It's really a great archive, and he was the right man for the job. There's no doubt. In 1955, Jaime Waxman drafted a State of the School of Music document for Dean State. Waxman discusses every aspect of the program. He talks about stronger curriculum development and rise in faculty in history, theory, and education. The demanding and rewarding performances being performed by the orchestra, band, and choirs. Outreach that the school was doing through all state ensembles and new interactions with Midwest music schools, including composer symposiums. New areas for the PhD program, and how the acquisition of East Lawn as a building was helping the department to grow. He concludes by arguing for more funds, as every department head should, and for the Department of Music to graduate to a school within the structure of the university. Quote, "It should be pointed out that our chief competitors are all schools of music, not departments. They are attracting many students who believe it impossible to receive a vocational and liberal arts education simultaneously. This is a matter for future study, undoubtedly. Without being immodest, I believe it is safe to say that no institution of similar size and with as limited a budget is training students in the field more adequately or imbuing them with higher musical ideals," unquote. The foundation built during the Clapp years would lead to even further and more robust expansion in the almost 3 decades of the Waxman years. For students entering the program in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there was always something new and exciting happening in the department and eventually School of Music. The faculty was expanded. Tenured instructors were available in every primary wind, string, and brass instrument. Percussion was added in 1958 with the hiring of Tom Davis, who also helped bring jazz to Iowa. Music education curriculum took great strides. You could now train to be an actual music teacher, and was helping to bring in better students from the state. Music therapy was added in the late 70s with the hiring of Erwin Schneider in the music education faculty. Composition also expanded with the establishment of the Electronic Music Studio by Robert Schallenberg in 1963 and the Center of Music by Richard Hervig in 1967. And I would be remiss to not point out that the Music Library was established in the mid-1950s under the management of librarian and also later musicology faculty member Dr. Rita Benton. The faculty grew and changed. 84 different faculty members served in the school between 1954 and 1980. Piano, voice, and organ, which had always been at the core of the school's offerings since 1906, bolstered their programs. Organ with the hiring of Gerhard Kropf, Delbert Disselhorst, and Dolores Buchanan. Piano with John Sims, Kenneth Amata, James Avery, and a holdover from the Clapp years. And I have to show this picture because she must have been such a character. This is Norma Cross, who was on the piano faculty. And I have no idea why she's in that costume, but it's great. I picked up a donation about 1.5 years ago from a longtime piano teacher in the area, and she was an Iowa grad. And we were sitting and chatting, because I love talking to Iowa alumni. They always have great stories. And I said, "Oh, so who did you study with?" She said, "Oh, I studied with Norma Cross. She was great instructor. I learned a lot." She said, "The weirdest thing, though, she was a real character. She had this chubby teddy bear that would always sit on her piano. And I asked her about it one day. I was like, 'What's that about?' She's like, 'Oh, well, that's PG. I named him for Clapp.'" Oh, yeah. Of course, this was also the era of the Iowa and eventually Stradivari String Quartet, Alan Ohms, Don Haynes, Bill Prusel, and Charles Wendt forming the core of that ensemble. And another gem from the School of Music archives is this photo. This might be my favorite thing of the entire presentation. Somebody messed around with the faculty directory in the 1960s to create the Sick'em Stupid building, Mephistopheles' Dead Music Department, including such illustrious faculty as J. Beercan, Blooper, T. Hot Air, Wild Bill Prusel, Stark Naked, Page Turner, and Batman. As the sign says at the bottom, hee hee. The orchestra sat under the baton of James Dixon, who, like Harold Stark, was recruited straight out of his grad degree. Dixon was a protege of Dimitri Mitropoulos. He did skip out and become assistant conductor at Minneapolis for a year, spent some time in Germany conducting, but ended up coming back to Iowa and led one of the sharpest college orchestras of the 20th century. The band program benefited greatly from stronger ties with area schools under the leadership of Fred Ebbs and then Frank Pearsall. After Ebbs departed, the concert band director no longer directed the Hawkeye Marching Band, and Tom Davis and Morgan Jones took that responsibility for the remainder of the Voxman years. Harold Stark continued to lead the university choir until 1961 when he handed it over to Daniel Moe. And there's a series of just marvelous oratorio and other large, like grand chorus concerts with Daniel Moe and Jim Dixon conducting it. I'm really hoping we can get transferred off of reel so we can hear them. And then Don Moses followed in 1972. He realigned the choral programs. They look more like they do today, including the premier group Cantorai being formed. Starting in 1950, Harold Stark led the opera program at Iowa, staging mainly light opera, operetta, and one-acts or scenes, and this includes a summer show. The program has produced several outstanding graduates, including Simon Estes, Michelle Kreider, and Costanza Cucharo. An early music ensemble was formed under the musicology department for the performance of medieval Renaissance and early Baroque music called Collegium Musicum. It was run by Ed Kotick and Elizabeth Aubrey. Collegium is one of the few ensembles that no longer exists, but the instruments are still around, and if you want to play gamba, you can play gamba. See Dr. Wilson Kimber. The electronic music studio was formed in 1963 by Robert Schallenberg, but he left 3 years later, and this man, Peter Todd Lewis, took over. I love this picture. It screams the 60s in every way. It's one of my favorite pictures. And in 1967, due to a large grant from the Rockefeller Foundation, the Center for New Music was established under the leadership of Richard Hervig. A large number of faculty were hired with the funds from the grant, including Patrick Purswell, Joan Purswell, William Parsons, Doris Allen, William Coney, and Janet Steele. The center's early years included performances of what we would consider sort of standard 20th century rep now, but it was happening stuff in the day, including this amazing double bill in 1969 of George Crumb's Songs, Drones, and Refrains of Death, which was an Iowa commission, and Luciano Berrios' Traces, which was problematic. In her dissertation on the history of the center, Barbara Phillips Farley writes, "The May concert was the final one of the season for the CNM, and it featured the Crumb piece and the first performance of Berrios' Traces. Hervig said, quote, the biggest disaster was the first performance of Berrios' Traces. Traces was very difficult to rehearse because the notation was vague. Furthermore, the composer wanted the performers to act and simulate a race riot in the middle of the piece, and this made the performers quite uncomfortable. Hervig and Jenny recalled that Berrio really felt we should have had half the chorus in blackface. It was just a total disaster. This did not happen, by the way. One of the things, I think this is Hervig, saying I remember very strongly was a performance that I finally didn't do. I went to all the rehearsals and got sort of bummed out. That was Berrios' Traces. The notation was very sloppy, had lots of signs that were unexplained. There wasn't one explanatory note in the score. We just had to fake it. I thought, well, maybe not. I think I'll just sing and play the piano and something else. Berrio later withdrew this composition, but even with the unsuccessful performance of his piece, he did enjoy his stay in Iowa City. The center also served as an incubator for the composition students and faculty at Iowa. This is a piece by Peter Todd Lewis from our rare book room, and I'm a big fan of this. I really want to hear it performed. Alcazar 3 is for a minimum of 4 instruments or of similar or diverse timbres, maximum to 4 orchestra. The instructions are drawn from Lewis Carroll. Start at the beginning, go to the end, and then stop, the Red Queen to Alice. The score is a maze, which is entered from the lower right, in which each performer proceeds to work through at his own pace, playing all pitches encountered, in any register and as soft as possible. Exercise care and patience. When the final note is reached, maintain it for about 5 seconds, gradually diminuendo. The piece is over when everyone is finished. Optional, the player may start the maze again 10 seconds after completing the first round. This is truly the song that never ends. Early in his time as director, Jaime Albert Looper, Eldon Obrecht, Harold Stark, Tom Turner, and John Sims wrote a proposal for a new degree program known as the Doctor of Musical Arts. This was a degree already available at several peer institutions, such as Indiana, Michigan, and Florida State. The primary arguments for adding the degree at Iowa were thus. It was recognized that musician performers should be allowed to qualify for administrative positions and advancement in rank in college and university music departments by doing advanced and specialized work in this particular field of performance. The committee recognizes as well that the institution of this degree would be particularly appropriate at the State University of Iowa, where already creative work in music and related fine arts is recognized as suitable object of advanced study and a suitable subject of dissertation. In addition to adding the DMA, Jaime made a considerable effort to bring composers of note to campus throughout the 50s and 60s for the Creative Arts Week. And here's a series of letters. Some of these people came, some of them did not. We have Milton Babbitt, Ernst Krenek, who had big ties with Minneapolis, so that's not as surprising. Samuel Barber. We know Luciano Berio came to campus. Aaron Copland came to campus. This is not actually related to Creative Arts Week, but this is from Nadia Boulanger, and it's awesome. So it's her recommending a student to study at Iowa, and I just couldn't resist. Howard Hansen, Dean of Eastman School of Music. And in 1961, Waxman commissioned a work from composer Darius Milhaud, who came to campus for rehearsals and also spent time working with students and the composition faculty. And this continues today. We still bring in composers, and they do master classes and work with the composition students. What made Milhaud's visit special was the commission. It was his cantata on text from Chaucer, which was an apt choice for a city dedicated to literature and with an excellent chorus and orchestra. I'm really impressed with Milhaud's correspondence on this issue. He responded timely, he had sort of a schedule, completed the commission on schedule, was talking with his publisher. I just don't really know how to handle that kind of efficiency. It's really great stuff. And there are probably about 7 or 8 letters between the two. But he left the most lovely thing behind, a manuscript copy of the score with the following inscription. Souvenir of a magnificent performance of this cantata, May 10th, 1961, in Iowa City with many thanks. Milhaud. It's one of our few manuscripts in the rare book room. 1965 finally saw the Department of Music graduate to become the School of Music, as Jaime had requested 10 years prior. What had for many years been the Department of Music was this year changed to the School of Music, reflecting the tremendous growth in this area at the U of I. Directed by Professor Jaime Waxman, the school offers its more than 325 majors, 5 degrees, including Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Music, Master of Arts, Master of Fine Arts, and Doctor of Philosophy. However, the biggest change of this era was 6 years in the future. For years, the School of Music grabbed space on campus wherever possible, squeezing into rooms too small and too few, but in 1971, they got their wish. In 1967, plans for the very first music building were released, as well as a companion auditorium. The, quote, combined building would be erected on an Iowa riverbank. We'll talk about that later. This is a better picture of the rendering for that building. And this is the only really good picture I can find of the building being built. It's a great picture for so many reasons. You have Richard Hervig either giving or receiving a certificate. I think it's his name on the certificate. It's kind of hard to tell. We don't know who the woman is. But you can see the crane in the background and sort of that dug-up feeling that new buildings have around the outside. Quote, although the University of Iowa School of Music achieved high standing rather early in its 63-year history, not until the summer of 1971, did the school move from hand-me-down housing into a home of its own. The new School of Music new University of Iowa Music Building is unique among major university facilities in its scenic riverbank setting and its location within the complex of related facilities comprising the Iowa Center for the Arts. The 720-seat concert hall was named in honor of P.G. Clapp, and the smaller 200-seat recital hall for Earl Harper I'm sure Clapp would have appreciated that. The building was, in many ways, the culmination of the hard work that people like Clapp, Voxman, and many faculty at Iowa had poured into the program for 65 years. The school finally had a roof over its head, and more importantly, a place to call home. In 1980, Jaime Voxman retired. Fred Crane writes that the School of Music's first 75 years were marked by a number of revolutions: the arrival of P.G. Clapp, the introduction of graduate studies and degrees, the rapid growth of the 50s and 60s, the beginnings of the technological era, the new music building, new programs such as musicology, music therapy, and jazz. The last quarter century seems to be more evolutionary in nature, with small changes, small improvements. Established programs and ensembles remained, though it should be pointed out that in this era, jazz and therapy really took off. You had Steve Grismore and John Rapson hired, and Mary Adamek and Kate Gefeller, and they really have built those programs up in the post-1980 era. I had to use a very, very small font on this page, and I can't say that I counted it up like the last one. This is probably somewhere between 90 to 100 faculty listed there. In 1981, Marilyn Somville, a vocalist and scholar, was appointed director of the School of Music, and she served in that position for the decade. If you look through the school's newsletters, it shows a program enjoying its maturity. Programs like the Center for New Music, still highly active in exploring new territory, music symposia and conferences, normal occurrences on the Iowa campus, and technology starting to play a role. In 1985, you can see it was being used to create marching band maneuvers. The newsletter contains pages that recognize the many accomplishments of current faculty, and even more pages recognizing the accomplishments of Iowa's vibrant alumni. The first 75 years of the school began to pay important dividends as Iowa graduates impressed as performers, scholars, and college professors. Iowa was able to bring back successful students, for example, bass baritone Simon Estes, to anchor extravagant productions like 1985's Boris Godunov, an ambitious production for a light opera program. Most opera companies don't even do this. Sadly, Estes became ill, and somebody local had to step up, but the show did go on and was a rousing success. Estes returned to campus to perform with another outstanding voice alumnus later in the decade, Michelle Kreider, and that's the two of them pictured with Beaumont Glass, who was the opera director at the time. John Hill stepped up in 1990 and 91 to serve as interim director until the hiring of David Nelson, who is a violinist and music educator. And he was chair until 2000 when Kristen Thielander took over for that decade. And I was looking through a lot of the newsletters, and I really liked the music at Iowa that was produced when Dr. Thielander took over. Thielander described the history of the School of Music and how it informed current programs. In a way, Professor Voxman represents the comprehensive nature of our School of Music and the breadth of interests and pursuits for which many of us continue to strive. Progress continued under the leadership of Marilyn Somville from 1980 to 1990. David Nelson, our most recent director, has led us through many exciting changes. Today, we really have a new school, even though it builds on the excellent traditions of the past, as this is largely because 75% of our faculty were hired in the past decade. And this photo kind of illustrates that reality. The people who were hired in the late Clapp years and in the Voxman era, serving at the university for 20, 30, 40 years, were starting to retire. And new faculty were joining the school in droves. You can look through the newsletters, and there's double spreads of new faculty coming in. This is 1992, 1995, 1996. These faculty were bringing in new perspectives and voices to the department and expanding the school's networks nationally and internationally. Thielander goes on to describe the school and its trajectory into the 21st century. During this academic year, our faculty are performing in Brazil, Argentina, Russia, Germany, France, Sweden, Canada, China, and Korea, and presenting papers and lectures in England, Ireland, Italy, and Trinidad. This global perspective and high level of scholarly and creative activity influences our students by bringing new and diverse ideas to and from our campus. Activity on our campus has increased too, with the number of performances growing in recent years from 100 to nearly 200 major events annually. Thielander singles out such things as the recent International Festival of Russian Music, hosted by the Center for New Music and overseen by David Gomper, significant growth in jazz and music therapy programs, the latter adding its excellent music degree, master's degree in 2000, I couldn't help but put up the cover photo for this particular newsletter. I'm a huge fan. It pictures Tadeo and Benjamin Coelho, brothers from Brazil, who both served on the faculty at this time. Benjamin is dressed as Elvis for a good reason. We have a bassoonist in the audience, she knows why. Having performed Michael Dougherty's 1993 composition Dud Elvis that season. According to Dougherty, who's actually from Cedar Rapids, Dud Elvis is scored for the same instrumentation as Histoire du Soldat, in which a soldier sells his violin and his soul to the devil for a magic book. I offer a new spin on this Faustian scenario. A rock star sells out to Hollywood, Colonel Parker in Las Vegas for wealth and fame. And the score does call for the solo bassoonist to dress in Vegas Elvis gear. So, and that is just a sweet car to boot. I mean, it's great. Thielander concludes by recognizing the role of that technology is starting to play in the creation of music and in its instruction. Technology has far-reaching effects and is available to our students in our computer lab, our music theory classes, courses in electronic music, and recording in our faculty studios. Just 4 years prior, in this lovely sidebar that appears in the newsletter, the School of Music now has its own homepage for those with access to the World Wide Web. The page lists faculty, upcoming events, and other interesting information about the school. I love that it's just this tiny little paragraph. Even as the school looked forward, it sought to honor its past. In 1993, this letter was drafted. I think there's somebody who signed it sitting in the room. Jody Felkner, I think your name's on there. Yes? It was kind of hard to tell because there's signatures. Urging the School of Music to be renamed for Jaime Waxman. Quoted in the letter is faculty member Ed Kotick. The Waxman name would lend the School of Music an additional high degree of credibility to the academic music world. The school itself didn't end up bearing Waxman's name, but the building he worked so hard to make a reality did, as of 1995. And in 2013, the regents voted that the new building would also bear his name. In 2006, the School of Music celebrated its centennial year in grand fashion. Alumni, former and retired faculty returning to campus, and a year of performances and events kicked off with a September 9th concert in Hansher Auditorium. Director Kristen Thielander stated in the celebration's commemorative book, this centennial year is an opportunity to look back at the marvelous history of the School of Music, and also to look forward to the next century of arts at the University of Iowa and in our community. I was hoping to take a picture of the 100th anniversary mug, because I see them all the time, but I couldn't find one. So you'll have to make do with just the logo. 2 short years later, Iowa City and the University of Iowa watched as the riverbank near Waxman began to slowly disappear. On June 13th, the doors to Waxman and Hansher were chained and padlocked. It would be weeks until the water receded to the point where its occupants could survey the damage. Division of Performing Arts Administrator Kate Conrad describes that flashlight-illuminated walk through a powerless building. It was dark, it stunk, a really nauseating smell. The floors were slick so that when you tried to move something, especially something like a piano, it was easy to slip. There were people who were touring the building who had seen the 1993 100-year flood and were trying to do the math on when they could get back into this building, but Conrad took a look around and thought, we're never going back in this building, and she was right. The scramble ensued as the university pledged to be ready for classes in the fall semester. The school returned to the model of its earlier years, squeezing into every and any available space on and off campus in order to provide a full course schedule for its students. After things settled, and this was actually a couple of years for things to really settle down, the school was housed primarily in Becker, the UCC, Communications Center, the old Art Museum, 2 buildings on Clinton Street, an old church on Riverside Drive, and the music library moved to the main library. New director David Geer was handed 6 long years of studies, plans, renderings, and negotiations with FEMA. But you wouldn't know it when you talked to him, because he is super excited about what's coming in fall 2016. In fact, if you talk to Dave Geer about the future, he'll tell you all about the new building, how amazing it is, and what hard work has gone into making it a reality. He'll tell you about all the ways in which faculty and students have worked to keep the program up and running during the 8 years of separation. And I guarantee you'll hear him say something to the effect of, it's going to be worth it because next year will be amazing when we're all back together again. The School of Music's calling the next year Coming Home, and it really is. It's coming home to new rehearsal spaces, recitals, classrooms, the music library. a glorious 700-seat concert hall, and I got to stand on the stage a couple weeks ago, and it's really going to be something. And best of all, areas where students, faculty, performers, members of the community, guests, friends, family can all come together, study, experience, and create music. I'm quite excited for this future. I'm hoping the next time I get to tell this story, I'll get to do it in the style of Fred Crane. A lot of research, but a little bit of my own personal experience to add to the tale. Or in the words of Philip Greeley Clapp, when it comes to the history of the School of Music, a good time was had by all. Are there questions? I knew it.
If I may, I'd like to add a couple of footnotes.
Oh, please do. I was hoping that would happen.
One rather minor one. The Stradivari Quartet got its name from the loan of the Stradivari instruments
Yes.
to the quartet by the Library of Congress.
Yes.
And they played them, I can't remember how many years, but then they had to give them back, but they kept the name.
Yes.
That's where the name comes from.
And you can listen to their recordings in the Iowa Digital Library. They were digitized.
They are beautiful. They were about the only things that were recorded and kept in the library. We had a terrible time trying to get the, well, you know about that.
Yes, I do. That will change in the new building.
Yeah. The other thing is that when the building, the Hampshire Music Building complex was planned in the early 1960s, the architects, the donors were warned that this was a riverbank, it was not a good location, but as I am told, this is secondhand, maybe third-hand information, the people who were giving the big money wanted to have the river view.
Oh, I'm sure.
So that's why it was there. But then also, the legislature appropriated funds.
Yes.
This was the early 60s, and that was a big era of inflation, remember, between the 60s to 70s, and they would never increase the allocation. And so they had to cut back and cut back and cut back. And Hampshire pretty much, I think, stayed the way it was. It was the music building that got shafted. And I saw once the original, they still have them somewhere, the original plans of what it was supposed to have been. And you never saw what it became, but I did.
I did not.
And it was heartbreaking, the difference between what had been intended and what we ended up with, including some walls that I think you could have kicked a hole in with your foot. The building construction was so poor.
Yeah, people have a lot of nostalgia for the building. I think for the community it created, less so for the actual structure. Where I hear there just wasn't space for people to really get together. The hallways were very narrow.
It was not a friendly building.
Yeah.
Anyway.
People also did enjoy that riverbank.
So in a certain sense, the flood was a blessing in the long term.
Yeah,
for the School of Music.
It's interesting to me that the complex, it said $10 million for music building in that article. It was supposed to be 10 for music, but 30 overall for the full project. And the building up there is a lot more money. It's like 150. So yeah, some big upgrades coming.
Well, I was walking down to the farmer's market tonight, and I walked down the alley, leaving the library behind the Episcopalian Church. And I think that there are still music students in that building, is that right?
Yeah,
because there was practice going on. I thought, oh, that won't be here next year at this time. I mean, it has been, it's kind of interesting to see the music students, because they're, at least the ones who play instruments, the instrumental students all over town, because they have their instruments with them. And in the past, you would only see them, like you would see the band going, perhaps, or the pep band at the games.
The school downtown will mean that you'll get to see them a bit more often.
Oh, I think that the choice of calling it Coming Home is wonderful, but it's been I think sort of an interesting phenomenon to have music spread out everywhere in the community. Not ideal, obviously, but
Challenges for the students for sure, having to hoof it across. I mean, it's great to see them with the instruments, but
yeah, who knew that
you're cellist, it's not fun.
You could carry a trombone on your back and ride a bicycle, which I see somebody up and down College Street a lot doing that.
I'm a flute player, so
it would have been easy for you. So are there other questions?
Comments?
Oh.
Please.
Somewhere in the Daily Iowan, there's an article, and I can't tell you what year, where they're interviewing Jaime, and he's talking about, the plans for the building, and how bad things are, and how hot the the current buildings are, and I found this and I was like, oh, he went through what we went through. And then I looked at the date of the article and it was, like 20 years before they actually got that building, I mean, it was a long time. So it was tough. But
What amazes me about what Clapp's talking about, the heat and all of that, they're doing reviews in July. I don't know why. It's very strange, but yeah, I can't imagine being in any of those buildings in the summer trying to do oral exams. I mean, just that would, everyone looks horrified. You can't see it on the camera, but everyone looks horrified.
And also, I think your little line about the water coming up slowly, it came up pretty fast.
Yeah, well, I wasn't here. Poetic license.
My internet was out because of Cedar Rapids being flooded, and I got a phone call from one of my colleagues who was on the East Coast saying, I just found out we're being flooded, would you go clean out my office? And so we went that afternoon, and in a matter of 4 to 5 hours, moved everything from the ground floor to the top. And then as we drove away, you could see the water bubbling up through the street, what do you call those? Manholes, yes. Like over by the art building. I mean, it was, and by the next day, it was too late.
Yeah, there is a mention that somebody came back thinking they could get back in the next day and they padlocked the doors. It was just, it's done. And they weren't able to get everything off the first floor. And the second floor was really starting to fill up from the sounds of things. I did go and watch some of the video footage the universities put up of the flood, and it's just, yeah. The water burbling outside the doors at Clapp is just, it's nuts. Yeah. So.
Sally Mason had, who was then president, had a reception. I can't remember what the occasion was, but I got invited, so it had to have been something to do with music. And I remember standing on the upper level, the balcony or whatever it is that looks out over the river, and she said she remembered the night that the river rose, and she stood there all night watching the water come up over the banks. Yeah. And it was one of the saddest moments of her life. This is just a little bit of history,
Wow.
So, yeah.
Thanks again for your talk, and I enjoyed the narrative. I had a question about your process. Yes. I can imagine you were sifting through a lot of stuff, or could you talk more about that? And
yes.
Were there things that you couldn't put into the talk due to time restriction?
Well, there's a lot I didn't put in due to time restrictions. There are so many programs you could talk about at Iowa. I mean, honestly, I'm the music librarian. I would have loved to spend probably at least 15 minutes talking about the music library alone. I started with Fred Crane's Century book. It's a wonderful overview of the programs and happenings of the School of Music. He was an excellent scholar, and it really forms the backbone of the talk. But then I really wanted to be able to go into archives that weren't necessarily available when he wrote that book. He relied very heavily on the dissertations that I mentioned. And so the Clapp archive's been organized since then. The Voxman archive, there have been more papers taken in since then. Some of these photos wouldn't have been available to him. And we're taking in his own archive, which he collected everything. And so we've been finding great stuff in that. So and you're going to find all kinds of collections that have been digitized and put in Iowa Digital Library. I was able to sift through the Daily Iowan online and pull down images and content. So I just had a lot more primary sources that I could sift through very quickly and sort of pick and choose what I wanted to be able to show today. And there's more to find in all of those archives and all those resources. But this is what I was able to put together for this evening. But that was really what I was looking to do, was rely as much on primary sources as I could so that I could share the actual documents this evening. I'm a librarian. That's what I wanted to do.
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. It was exactly what I had hoped that you would do. And I do have one last question. So,
Sure.
He's writing to Gladys, is that his wife?
Gladys was his first wife.
Was his first wife, and she didn't come to Iowa with him?
I don't think she did at first, and then I think she followed later. And I can't remember the name. Mildred, I believe, was his second wife.
Well, those little snippets of his letters are just fantastic, and I'm going to have little air quotes in the things that I say and have them in honor of him. So thank you very much. This was a great program, Katie.